Hey there, everyone. Thanks very much for stopping by the Digital Creator Daily. If you're new here, I'm Rob from Hey Summit, and this is the daily-ish show where I get to have some awesome conversations with brilliant people doing very interesting things. We talk about the creator mindset, staying authentic, assembling your toolkit, exploring different platforms, and so much more. It's a pretty relaxed show about and for creators, thought leaders, and independent entrepreneurs. And just a reminder, a conversation is best when it is shared. So however you're tuning in, feel free to jump in with your thoughts, with your questions, your perspectives. And thanks again for spending a bit of time with us today. So today I'm incredibly lucky to have on Natalie Luneva. Natalie is a growth consultant to SaaS Founders. SaaS is software as a service. She's on a mission to help SaaS companies scale, clarify business priorities, and grow high-performance teams. Drawing from her 10 plus years of leading marketing teams, she helped over 100 companies implement high ROI opportunities, scale their operations, clarify business priorities, and grow high performance teams. So Natalie, thanks very much for coming on.
Excited to be here. Hey, everyone.
So I guess I wanted to start with like your story. So I know that you wear a number of hats. I mean, if anybody connects with you on LinkedIn and looks at your experience, there are so many things that are X date to present, right? So how did you get started with I guess your professional life, one, but then specifically why consulting? Why does consulting form a large part of that?
This is something that I'm going to be sharing for the first time, I think, ever to anyone on the internet. But I started getting paid $2 an hour. I used to live in Russia. My husband and I, we are both Russians. We moved to the United States about 10 years ago, maybe like 12 years ago or so. And so when I just started out, I was in Russia. And so, salaries are everywhere, kind of funky and different. So I started out as a $2 an hour personal assistant. And so very quickly started doing more marketing, landed in a marketing agency, got paid maybe $3 an hour at the time, and then just got, more and more responsibilities, learned more and more about marketing, got really interested in the overall marketing thing. Then we moved to the United States, got a couple of jobs full-time as an employee in an office, and then got promoted multiple times very, very quickly because I learned a lot of things and just overall grew personally and professionally. And so spent, I probably worked maybe 70 hours a week. And so overall, like very, very passionate about all things growing companies and marketing. And so, very quickly I grew and changed multiple companies. And then tried doing consultancy for one industry. Didn't really work. Got back into working full-time at an office. Tried something else. Didn't really work. My husband then founded a software company. Started helping him. It's just overall, it's just lots of trials and errors. Learning, constantly evolving, not staying still, and kind of dive in where you're not sure what's going to happen, but you know that this might be the right thing to do, or at least staying where you are is not the right thing to do. And so, it's just evolving.
So I love that. And I also love the fact that you said several times, tried this thing, didn't really work, tried something else, didn't really work, and then figuring out your way. I think oftentimes, especially when you're talking about consulting or whenever you're talking about like working for yourself in any way, whether it's as a co-founder of something like Outranking, which I'd love to kind of get into as well, or building your own business, you are putting yourself out there. So you are literally putting yourself out there, and potentially, if it doesn't work, it's very hard to not take that as you don't work, right? So how did you approach learning from that early on, especially those things that maybe didn't go so well, so that you weren't, demotivated, or maybe you were demotivated? How did that all work?
I think it's just different personalities take it differently. I'll give you one example. I had my first speaking engagement, maybe like 70 people live. It was around maybe 3, 4, maybe like 5 years ago. didn't go so well. I was preparing like heck, and it's just, you get nervous in front of so many people, and like I wasn't happy at how I performed, even though maybe people weren't people weren't standing and leaving the room. They were still listening to me, but I personally wasn't happy. And so what I did, like easily, I could just stop, and this is not my thing. I hate doing this, but I knew that I needed to kind of move on. And so I just started taking coaching. So I hired someone like a consultant to review what I did wrong. And so my next presentation, I was kind of, being coached by the person. And, he would give me all the kind of tips. And then I would send him a recording from the second session. It wasn't much better, but, I thought that this is the right path. Like I knew that this was not immediate. So I think it's just constantly knowing that either you stay where you are, but that's where you're going to stay, right? Or you make yourself feel uncomfortable, you stretch yourself, and this is where you really going to grow. This is what I share with every single one founder that I am in touch with, or I coach, or I work with. Being comfortable is great, and I know a lot of people that this is where they want to stay, but this is where you will stay. So if you want to grow, because other companies growing, other founders, other people, entrepreneurs growing, and if you are not, then you're just, you're not staying still, but you are being left behind. And so just growing as much as you can, knowing that there will be problems, there will be something that you need to, step up your game and know that you're going to fail. So I think maybe let's even talk about parenthood. I am a parent of 2 kids. Like, that things are going to be hectic. There's going to be problems. Not everything's going to go right. Actually, you get to expect that things are not going to go right. And when you come up with this mindset that things are not going to go right, then those failures are not as devastating.
That's a really interesting way to put it, because I think a lot of people might approach it. They might approach a very similar situation and think the absolute opposite. That absolutely, oh, I failed that talk. I didn't do it well enough. That means I'm just not cut out for talking. I'll do something else. And I think that there's a difference in terms of the mindset of self-improvement rather than chasing perfectionism or nothing. And I get the sense that that's such a valuable thing that it sounds like you make it a little bit more effortless than maybe it is. But
and you know what? Really quick, there is a great book. I don't remember the title of this book, but if you Google something like "Fixed and Growth Mindset," you're gonna find this book. It is an amazing book, and I think I've read it maybe like 2 years ago, and I've recommended to multiple people that I know. Think that this is where I am. I'm not good at math, for example. Well, you're not good at math because you weren't trying good enough, or you didn't spend enough time, or stuff like that. Everyone can be better at the things that they're not good at right now, and so this book is just amazing. Highly recommend to anyone.
I too am going a blank on the name, but it is a pretty well known one that folks can check out. Why? So do you think that like growth mindset, that interest, it seems like a pretty strong self-motivation to improve, is a reason why you're not working for a big company? Like why? Because some people would say, go and work for a company and then rise to the ranks, specialize, become some sort of an executive. There's that kind of path, but then there's the other one of, let me work with early stage founders or early stage business people, or let me work for myself. Do you think that those two are linked in terms of like why you kind of chose to stop with the or to maybe not work as much in like big company environments?
You know what? I did become an executive. I was a marketing director at multiple companies fairly quickly, being fairly young in my 20s, like mid 20s, which I absolutely was not expected, or I wasn't expecting myself to do that. And I was managing multiple people. I had like 10 people department, managing multi-million-dollar budgets while I was still like 24 or 25, which is absolutely, it was crazy for me to think now looking back at this. However, this is a lesson that I'm sharing with a lot of people. There's a saying that you can leave 5 years. Let's say you work for a company for 5 years and you basically like have this experience as if you were 5 years, or you can do the same thing 5 years, in a row. So I can't remember exactly the same, but I figured that I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And at this point, it doesn't really matter for me whether I work for myself or I work for another company. It's really like the mindset of, am I able to learn something new, or am I just repeating myself over and over again? And every single company that I left, and I left very high-paying jobs just because like I figured out that I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm leaving, it's not like I have 5 years worth of experience. Let's say I have, 1 year worth of, 5, I don't know how it's called, but basically you're like
1 year with 5 experiences,
exactly.
And then you want to, yeah, exactly. No.
So yeah, I figured that, it's time to leave. And so every single time now looking back at this, I'm like, I needed to leave sooner and not stay there, let's say 5th years or even 4th years. And then closer to like recently, some of the past positions, it was only like 1.5 years where I figured that, this is time to move on.
Sure. So, and thanks, Octavia. She comments that the book that you're talking about is Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck, exactly.
Fixed and Growth Mindset. So yeah, thanks for that, Octavia. So getting back to like you thinking about how you want to start your consulting business, how I'd love to hear a little bit about those. Maybe we'll call them experiments now because they were in the past, but those initial steps that you took. Walk me through like how you thought, I'm going to build this. I'm going to try and build this as a consulting business. What is my industry and who is my target customer? How did you go about that initially?
My first company was a little tiny marketing agency specifically specializing for medical practices. I used to work as a marketing director for a chain of medical clinics. And so I figured, hey, it is pretty easy to, at the time, by the way, when I was leaving that company, I'm like, what services am I going to offer if I go and do this as a consultant? Which sounds like absolutely crazy. But at the time, I think everyone has, their own stuff that prevents them from, making the leap. And so that was like, I'm looking back at that and I'm like, how possible that the marketing person is not able to offer services to, other companies, right? But at the time, I'm like, what am I going to offer those companies? So I had experience working for medical clinics and I decided to start working with a bunch of medical clinics, which I did. The only problem is I picked the wrong niche. I didn't really like working for medical doctors and medical clinics because doctors are so hard to work with. And so all of my, bosses, basically like the company that I left, I had one boss. But, when you have multiple clients, you have multiple bosses and all of them have very high ego, like these doctors, it's just has their own dynamics. And so that's why I decided like probably within a year that things are not going to work out. So lesson number 1 is choose the people that you actually want to spend time with, be friends with. If you're not able to actually like working with them, you're not going to like constantly having them as clients.
That's a really good point. I think a lot of times, especially when you're thinking about going off on your own and you haven't kind of been through that, maybe you're thinking, I just got to chase the money. Like, where's the money coming from? Gotta focus on that. Gotta go where the clients might be. And you forget that, especially if you're working on your own, especially if you're a consultant, being in love with the people who are having the problems that you're helping to solve is really critical, because then you can be in the trenches with them. You can be okay with them having a bit of a freak out or the way that they're working, because you understand them, but also you just really love working with them. And that's it's a really important point that people don't necessarily think about. They just think, oh well, I just got to go into business. I gotta find some clients. Versus, do I actually like them? Do I like working for these people? Because otherwise you get resentful and it doesn't become fun.
Yep. And so what happened next is I'm like, I'm not sure. I know that I don't want to work with the doctors. What are some other industries out there? So I decided to work for a marketing agency as a marketing director. And so this was my plan to figure out what are some industries that I actually want to work with. I didn't know like what's going to happen in the next couple of years. I'm like, okay, I need to figure out, I like working, I enjoy what I'm doing, so let me just work at a marketing agency and figure out what works. Well, what happened is my husband is a software engineer, so he's founder of a couple of SaaS companies, and I started helping him with a couple of things. One of them is team management, operations, marketing, and growth. And he's like, when I started walking him through the problems that an early stage founder is experiencing, especially the founder who doesn't have experience managing teams, he's like, you absolutely need to do the same thing for other founders, because I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one. Well, he was not the only one. And so I started talking to more and more founders. And this is how I switched completely to helping SaaS founders, software founders, just because I love the mindset. I love the mindset and how hard they work to achieve the results. And let's say, you see 2% increase here, and they're totally, see the results, while other industries, even like medical doctors, they're like, 2%, here, 2% there. So they're not really like as numbers oriented. And so I totally fell in love, and this is what I've been doing, and this is what I envision probably going to do for another years.
And how do you find, so did you have a problem when that was, so obviously that's a really good story. That's a really good way of articulating how you kind of found that you actually were providing some value here, that you had something to say that was worth maybe other people paying for. How did you take that awareness of like, okay, you're a SaaS founder, but you have these gaps. I think, it's likely that you have these marketing gaps. How did you take that and turn it into a business? Was it a case of experiment, like productizing yourself? Was it trying to look at different communities that were out there, or do other things to test out how you were going to engage with these SaaS founders?
Number one is I joined a bunch of communities out there, Facebook groups, Slack channels, and I started digging into what people have problems with. And then if I found something that I would be able to help with, plain and simple, I would reach out to the person, and not really being weird, but just trying to help and seeing if there's any opportunities for us to work together. Explain my experience, explain that I think I'll be able to help with this, using X, Y, and Z, for example. And that was plain and simple. In the beginning, I didn't really focus on productizing anything. I just wanted to learn as much as possible about the problems, which led me very quickly to actually start my own podcast, start a community, start a mastermind group, just so that I'm able to talk to other experts, other founders, and like overall what's happening in the industry. And so what I learned is communities are huge, and it becomes so easier when you have a community, a bunch of people who are your ideal audience. Maybe that you don't talk as selling them anything, but really it's just talking to them as like what's happening in the industry, what's happening with your product, what are some problems that you experience, and then hearing the terms that they use to talk about their problems. For example, I'll give you an example. Medical doctors would never call their patients clients. And when you are not 100% sure on the terminology that those people are using, you're going to be in trouble, because they will know right away that you are not there. You are not in the industry. You're not speaking their lingo. So I try to stay as much as possible in the communities, commenting, reaching out to those people cold where possible, and then very quickly grew my awareness, I guess. People started talking about what I do, SaaS Boss, my community, started having the mastermind, and then very quickly, it's like a huge flywheel. You turn it, and it's very slow. It's turned very slowly, and you just need to spend so many times, so much effort, and weeks and weeks of your time to make a small shift. And then when it picks up the speed, everything becomes so much easier.
I think that's a really important thing to hammer home, and I think a lot of people think of this as, there are a lot of stresses that you put on yourself, but there's also a lot of like kind of hard and fast rules that people sometimes forget. okay, I'm a consultant. That means I need to go out today and get my first 100 clients, and I should be able to get them by the end of the week. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But also, you don't need to put that pressure on yourself in a way. Otherwise, it's likely that maybe that won't be successful. There's what you describe is very similar to an awareness building campaign. and then eventually moving through to activation and then to conversion. It as you say, you use the metaphor of a flywheel, but or an avalanche. You got to start slowly. It means results, not necessarily activity. And I think oftentimes, especially when you're going down a road that you aren't necessarily sure about, or that hasn't been done before, you worry that it's like, well, is it moving slowly just because I'm crap at this? Or is it moving slowly because it just needs some time to move? So I just think that's a really interesting way to put it. And any specific, whether strategy or thought leader that you were following at the time, or were you just kind of discovering this for yourself?
A couple of thoughts as a follow-up to what you were just saying. Number one, I think when you're desperate for customers, people can tell. So that's why every single time when I think I was more or less successful was when I wasn't desperate for customers. I had, some kind of income that I didn't need to worry about, like I needed a customer like today or tomorrow to pay the bills. That wasn't the case for me. And this is when I felt like I was the most successful. In the beginning, where I was like, I had zero, salary. I left my job and now I don't have anything. Now I'm, much more obviously, you know that you need to make it. Otherwise, like when you are comfortable and you're like, you know what, this is not my ideal customer. And if it's not, then say no. And if it is, say yes, right? And so I think customers also, those leads, they kind of feel that you are not desperate. And so they talk to you differently. And they trust you a little bit more because maybe you are using some terms that, like you were saying, like, let me see if this is the right fit. Let me check, are you doing this X, Y, Z? Because if you are, then this would not be ideal. This is not how I work. And so when they hear this, they're like, okay, this is the person who is busy with other customers and not desperate for my job, for the work that I offer.
I absolutely, completely agree with that. I think that especially even if you're not, let's say, wanting to be a consultant, if you're just wanting to be a creator in general, if you look at different, any kind of metric or any kind of format, you do very quickly find people who seem to be making decisions out of desperation, and that's impacting where they're going. And sometimes they can be successful, but more often than not, you do notice that, and it actually is a bit of a turnoff. Whereas those who may be starting with a far smaller reach, but having the time of their lives, you kind of know that they have a lot more fuel, and you know that they're just going to be able to do that, like on and on and on. They clearly enjoy doing it, and they can. And both of those scenarios need time, right? They need time to develop. They need time to build an audience or whatever it is that you're looking to do. And it's like, what's the quality of the fuel? That's really important. And if it's because it's either something you're super passionate about, or you enjoy, or you have the mindset of knowing that this stuff takes time, you're right. You can tell in the cold outreaches, you can tell in the kinds of events that they put on, or just the way that they behave when they're being interviewed. It's an interesting observation.
And you have an opportunity to test a few different things. You have an opportunity to experiment. Otherwise, like, this is where a lot of things, I think a lot of positive things came from, like, my recent activities is I wasn't hanging up on the outcomes, but I was like experimenting. How about this? How about that? And even though a lot of the things that I was doing, even take the online summit, hosting online summits, like I haven't hosted an online summit, I don't know, probably started hosting them since maybe 9 months ago, maybe, I don't know, a year or something like that. And so, which was something out of my world. For the first time, I didn't do like a Facebook Live or any interviews, maybe up until 16 months ago, 18 months ago. And so I continuously was stretching myself, and I knew that I wanted to test this, and that, because overall, this is something that's going to help me grow. And so I knew that I needed to get used to stuff. And so everything else becomes easier. So testing is important. And if, let's say, Summit wouldn't work, something else, I would do something else, right? But there are things that definitely we need to test and figure out whether we're good at this, whether we're like this, whether this is something that people need or not. There were definitely different offers that I was posting out there for people, and I was testing. Would they want this, or do they even know that they have this problem? Because if they don't know that they have this problem, I need to spend extra time educating them that they have this problem. Let's even take something like team management and team performance. Something like my husband had these problems previously. He's like, how do I host those? How do I run, let's say, even weekly meetings? He didn't even have like weekly meetings, which, to someone who has previously managed the team is absurd. But for someone who's just starting out, it is difficult to grasp if they don't have any management experience. And so like I would test different things, and in the beginning, I would tell them, you know what, your meetings suck, or like your management style sucks. And at that point, they didn't really care. Like some people didn't. Those that were a little bit more aware of that, they cared. And so had I not tried and test and tried to figure out what works and what people wanted, everything else that I have right now would not be possible.
Again, I think that's absolutely spot on, just in terms of the mentality of testing it and not beating yourself up if something doesn't work. I think oftentimes when I speak to creators and they're down in the dumps, they're like really frustrated because the thing that they had been working on for the past 3 months has just gone out and nobody's bought it. You're like, oh, I mean, great. Great that you're doing something, but was that the only thing you were working on for 3 months?
It is like, A/B tests. When you're working on the A/B test, let's say improve your website or whatever, you have A, B, C, and you have, let's say, 20 different things that you want to test, right? It's not like you're putting everything in one basket.
And at different stages, the title, at least in the Summit world, it's like, do I create a summit about do I do the Digital Marketing Summit 2021, or do I do the Facebook Ad Summit, or do I do the the Content Marketing Summit? First off, we would say don't do Digital Marketing Summit 2021. Focus on a niche. Test it. Create like 5 different landing pages and see which one everybody signs up to.
You can so easily run Facebook ads for 50
run Facebook ads for different titles. Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like the iterating, the experimentation is important, but the reducing the amount of time as much as possible. You can't reduce it to nothing, but like reduce the amount of time. Fast. Exactly. But failing, or maybe like even just pivoting fast.
Yep.
I feel like that sometimes, but it's hard because especially if it's about something that we're creating, that means you are putting your baby out there. And you kind of want to believe yourself that everybody wants this thing that you're creating, and you're afraid. You're afraid to actually go out there and ask if they actually want it in the first place, because you've already invested so much of your own kind of energy into that thing, and it's hard.
That is really so hard. True, and that is why so many founders, software founders, have this problem, especially software engineers. They want to build their beautiful baby, and in the end, like they're spending 5 months, and they're like, I need one more feature that's gonna take me another month to build. I need one more feature, and then my baby is gonna be beautiful, and only then am I able to release it. But you know what, they probably never gonna be willing to release it, because still it's taking a lot of negative feedback about the baby being ugly.
You're not, and that's gonna kill you. That's gonna really, really make you feel awful. I think certainly we have a kind of a saying. I'm sure that lots of other people have it as well. But like, you're not a solution trying to look for a problem. You really need to find a problem and fall in love with the problem, and be very willing to do everything you can to solve the problem, even if that means dumping your solution. If you found this problem that you really, really care about, and you're building a software product for that problem, great. But if you suddenly realize the thing that you've been building for a while does not solve that problem, you really should be okay with dumping it and starting over. And that's a very hard thing for people to do. And especially if you're like a consultant or something like that, you might be building this consulting business based off of a hypothesis that everybody in the world has this problem, but they don't.
That is so true. There's actually the number one reason why software companies fail is no market need. That means that founders, those software engineers, are building something that they haven't checked with the people whether they need it at all. They don't know, what features they need, and just overall, they haven't talked to their ideal customer.
Yeah, and the feedback loops. It's not even that they're not efficient; they're not in existence, and that's it's heartbreaking sometimes when you see that, because there's so much of this energy, and so much of it is very good energy. But yeah, we all are our worst kind of critic, right? And sometimes you're just afraid to put that out there because secretly you actually doubt yourself. And yeah, it's tough. That stuff's super tough. I'd love to ask a little bit about or talk a little bit about Outranking and just like your experience with that, especially in growing it as a business. But in particular, so I'd love to learn a little bit about Outranking, but also how do you balance that with the consulting side of your business, and how do you view, like we were just talking with Steph Smith a couple days ago, and she runs a product, and she does all of these projects outside, and that seems to be a wonderful experience for her because she loves having that core business, so she doesn't have to worry about paying the bills in a way, so that she can build these other projects or products that she just loves doing, and that's the reason why they're usually successful and viral and very popular. How do you see that? How do you see that balance?
Number one, this is not just combining my consulting with being a co-founder of the company, because I'm also a co-founder at another company. I also help my husband. I also do so many other things. I'm writing a book. I'm also a mom to 2 kids. So it's just a lot of things happening. And I think if you are not passionate about what you do, you would not be able to sustain and be excited to work on all of those things. Okay, so this is number one. What I was gonna say, number two. Let me try and remember. Oh, so here is how I'm thinking about, I have a goal. I know what I want to be in, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And in order for me to get there, I know the steps that I need to take. And I know the things that I need to kind of either learn or experience or test myself. And so I think me becoming a co-founder at another company was one step closer to my ultimate goal, which is either investing in other companies or becoming a co-founder as a service. So one of my goals is becoming basically having an agency that is going to be a co-founder, a growth co-founder to multiple SaaS companies. This is like something maybe like 5-10 years goal. And so I know that in order for me to get there, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the next 5 years. And so this is one of the steps. And so that's why I'm looking at this as another learning experience. Like, this is something that I need to experience, need to test the waters, need to test my framework and the things that I'm working on, just the things that I preach. And so this is one of the reasons why I became a co-founder at Outranking, which I became fairly recently, a couple of months ago. And overall, like, Outranking is, for anyone who is interested, the website is outranking.io, and it is an SEO tool, SEO plus content tool, basically, that helps produce SEO optimized content with the power of AI. So this is a tool.
Cool. So yeah, forgive me. I only said 2 of the things you were working on of the 50, 100 that you have. But it's interesting. So do you very much see this as you're on the path and you know the path? Have you sat down with yourself and created like a 5-year plan, or is it a case that you have this idea of where you need to get to, and you think that these are the ways you want to stretch yourself? How do you go about like organizing that from a I don't know, maybe from a professional development standpoint?
We just sat down with my husband and we're working on the same things. We're basically like a team. And so we just sat down and we discussed what it is that we want to do. And so this is the idea that came up with. And we knew what we wanted to, like, we basically discussed the things that we need to start working on right now. And this is the plan. It's not like, it's written down or we have our annual review or something like that. It is more taking time, maybe once a quarter. And it's, again, not written in our calendars, but something like, okay, here's where we are. Looks like we're not moving fast enough. Let's discuss what we want to do. And sometimes we try to take, let's say, quarterly, 2 to 3 days off and just go somewhere, just two of us, to clear our heads and talk about the future.
That's really cool. My wife and I do something similar, not 2 or 3 days, more just a turning off from technology and kind of doing a bit of self-reflection. But that's fascinating. It's really interesting the way that you articulate that. Thank you so much for taking the time, Natalie, and for giving a few minutes to chat with us today. And anyone, if you're watching this either live or on the replay and you want to connect with Natalie, you can find her on LinkedIn. And she is copied into all of the posts here, so you should be able to reach her that way. Thanks again for making the time, Natalie, and have a great weekend.
It was my pleasure, Rob. You too.
Alrighty, take care.